All was silent. No wind. No energy. No creepy internal voices. There was nothing. Nothing but the heaviness of night and his own staggering confusion. He grimaced, trying to peel away his frustration. He was growing so tired of unexplainable, unbelievable events.
"Grey, you okay?"
Monson squinted as a final burning sensation left his body, and the glare of silver eyes throbbed, its lingering traces blinding him. Casey and Artorius were at his side. Casey whispered to him gently,
"Seriously, Grey, are you okay? You're acting like you've seen a ghost or something."
Monson cut right to the point.
"You used Flash Fist again."
Casey's response sounded unsure. Yeah, I did a little maneuver I came up with on my own. I call it Flash Fist Psychosis. Pretty cool name, huh?" Monson, in spite of himself, chuckled.
"Yes, Casey, it's a great name. I'm surprised those guys didn't explode or something. The power you released was outrageous. You bring up an interesting point. You know, I've been meaning to ask you, how do you always seem to know when I'm using the Flash Fist?"
Monson glared at him disbelievingly.
"What do you mean, Casey? The fact that you expel all that energy from your body, how could I not know?"
"You see, that's what I don't get. How could you possibly know that I manipulate expelled energy?" Monson tried his best not to let his frustration boil over onto Casey, but really, how could he ask that? How did he know that Casey was using expelled energy? Either Casey was playing dumb or was crazy, both of which were terrible prospects.
"Casey, I'm sorry to say this, but that's an incredibly stupid question."
"How is that a stupid question?" Monson rolled his eyes.
"Think about it, Case. How do you think I'm able to tell that you're doing the Flash Fist? What would be the most logical answer?"
"Grey, are you telling me that you can see chakra?"
"Yes, Casey. That's exactly what I'm telling you."
Casey's voice started to sound angry. "Dude, you can't see chakra. It's impossible. It's like trying to see air or ultraviolet rays. Are you sure you didn't hit your head when we jumped the brush wall?"
"Listen to what he has to say, Case."
Artorius placed a hand on Casey's shoulder.
"While it's true that you shouldn't be able to see chakra, what just happened isn't ordinary either. Something drove me, Grey, and those MIBs to the ground, and it wasn't something physical."
"You too, Arthur? Jeez, what's up with you guys?"
Casey pulled Monson and Artorius closer.
"Listen to me, you two.
With the Flash Fest, you have to expel a lot of energy from your body, and then focus your intent. You were probably just feeling my focus combined with my chakra. Energy-centered martial arts will do that. That's another reason that high-level practitioners must have flawless discipline. If they don't, their opponent will read their movements like a book." Monson shook his head in frustration. This was not going the way it should, but what could he do? Trying to reason with Casey right now would be pointless, even if logic did fall on Monson's side. If he still wanted to meet Barty, time was running short. Monson decided to move to the more pressing matter.
"We don't have time for this. Let's talk about it after I meet with Barty."
Artorius and Casey whispered,
Agreed. "Done then. Don't forget, though, we need to finish this conversation."
Monson changed the subject.
"So, what about the MIBs? Did you kill them? Are we going to need to find some shovels?"
Casey seemed to catch on to what Monson was trying to do. "Grey, only you could say that with a straight face. Of course not, dude. I just messed them up a little. The move fries the brain a bit. If all goes well, they won't remember a thing about tonight."
"If all goes well?"
"Yeah. Well, the move doesn't always work, but hopefully there won't be any permanent damage." Artorius chuckled for a second time.
"Remind me never to threaten Kylie."
"What's that crap you're spouting? I wasn't doing any of that for her."
They just piss me off.
Sure, Casey. Whatever you say.
Monson slowly stood. Once at full height, he craned his neck to see over the brush wall.
So, what do we do with Mr. Skywalker and his buddy Jim?
More voices from the main pathway answered the question.
HQ, we have men down. I repeat, we have men down. Send all extra units. Location, the student dormitory. I think it's about time we make our exit, fellas.
Artorius' conversational tone hardly hid his apprehension.
We don't want to be here when the CIA and the rest of Barty's men get here.
CIA?
Monson was unsure that he had heard right.
The Corn Intervention Agency?
Monson started to giggle.
Now that's a terrible ripoff. The Central Intelligence Agency should sue for trademark infringement.
Additional voices and footsteps indicated the arrival of more of Barty's men, along with some of Corrin's special CIA security force.
We should split up.
Casey popped his head just above the hedge line of the brush wall.
Gray, you still going to see Barty?
Monson nodded.
Yeah, but hold on. Back up a second. Why are we splitting? Shush, you two.
Artorius pulled both Monson and Casey to the ground.
You guys have to work on your indoor voices.
Casey whispered derisively.
Arthur, we're outside. Using an indoor voice outdoors is a fundamental mistake of voice usage. And here I thought you were cultured.
Monson could actually feel Artorius rolling his eyes.
Anyway, Casey, you go that way. I'll take Gray to meet Barty. Got it. I'll meet you two back at Gray's place. Be careful.
Under the cover of night, Cassius K disappeared into the darkness, making no sound as he slipped into the shadows. Artorius and Monson crouched and moved slowly away from their hiding place, being careful not to make any noise as they crept along the border of the brush wall. Monson followed Artorius in silence until the echoes of gathering foot soldiers faded. Monson tapped Artorius on his lower back.
Arthur.
Yeah, Gray.
Why did we need to split up? Think about it, Gray. It's Casey we're talking about here. Yeah, I kind of figured. You good then? Yeah, I'm good.
Artorius turned and gave Monson a little pat on his shoulder.
Come on, Gray. You have a date with the CEO of the Barty conglomerate.
You're late, Mr. Gray.
Christopher Barty sat in a refined manner, sipping on wine and sampling a fine assortment of cheese and crackers. Monson walked slowly up the steps of the GM's inner courtyard main gazebo. Barty's goons patrolled the space, pacing in an assertive, confident way. They looked like machines moving in countless repetitions from one checkpoint to another. Before long, Monson started to see and memorize a pattern as the MIBs ran through their routine once, twice, then 3 times. He tried to ignore them and focus on Barty. Barty continued to sip on his wine, his face portraying nothing of his feelings or intention. Aaron Gibson was a great deal easier to read. He remained completely rigid, just behind Barty, watching the approaching Monson. At the sight of him, Monson felt a hasty desire to throw a vulgar gesture towards the assistant.
I'm glad you could make it, Mr. Gray. But why were you late?
Barty offered him a seat, pointing to it with his wine-free hand. Monson pulled out the chair and sat.
It's past curfew, Mr. Barty. I had to sneak out to meet you. If you were concerned with timeliness, you should have set the meeting during regular school hours. Then again, you already knew that, didn't you?
Barty let out one of his infectious laughs.
You are certainly correct, Mr. Monson. Do you mind if I call you Monson?
Not at all.
Monson helped himself to the tray of cheese and crackers.
But back to my question, Mr. Bart.
Please, call me Chris. All the Mr. Barty this, Mr. Barty that. It's very tiresome.
Monson popped the cracker and cheese into his mouth and gagged almost immediately, spitting out the food.
Holy freaking crap! What was that?
Vieux bouillon.
Barty attempted vainly to hold back his amusement.
Renowned as the smelliest cheese in the world. Definitively an acquired taste, but once you do...
You see, that doesn't make any sense to me.
What do you mean, Monson?
I mean, why would you force yourself to acquire a taste of something that awful?
Christopher Barty studied the inquiring face of Monson Grey, as if the answers were tattooed on the crinkled lines of his forehead. He sounded unsure once he spoke.
I don't know, Mr. Grey. That's an excellent question.
Monson.
What was that, Mr. Grey?
You asked me for my permission to call me Monson, and then you reverted back to Mr. Grey. I was just reminding you. Call me Monson.
Barty laughed again.
Sorry about that, Monson, my boy.
A crushing pang of familiarity slapped Monson's face.
My boy.
Monson's hand moved on its own, gravitating towards his pocket and grasping a white piece of paper. He threw the crumpled invitation onto the table.
I believe you were going to answer a question for me, Chris.
Barty glanced at the crushed paper on the table.
That I was, Monson, but one question at a time. Did you not want to know why I asked you to meet me here tonight, and after hours?
Monson refrained from saying that he did not care about that anymore, despite his inclination to do so. The only thing that kept him from blurting out that exact comment was the knowledge that later he would be upset with himself. That knowledge in mind, he gritted his teeth and answered,
Yes, I want to know why you brought me here and why we had to meet so late.
Barty took another sip of wine.
It may be shocking to know, but the answer is an exceedingly simple one.
Monson waited patiently for the punchline.
I was testing you, Monson.
You were testing me?
Yes, I was testing you.
What could be said after a confession like that? Monson did not know what he should be feeling. Should he be angry, confused, annoyed? He just did not know. He settled on confused and let the emotion reflect so it was easily noticeable.
I see that you're confused.
Oh, and I was trying so hard to hide it.
Monson caught a glimpse of Gibson, who gave an unexpected, appreciative chuckle in reaction to Monson's sarcasm. Barty continued, either not noticing or choosing to ignore Monson and Gibson.
Do you want to know why I'm so successful, Mr. Grey?
Another cheeky comment, half a second away from leaving Monson's lips, never quite made it out. Cold. Monson felt the cool impatience that started to emanate from Barty. Monson decided that it was about time to get down to serious business.
Sure, Chris. Why don't you tell me why you are so successful?
Because I always have better information than the next guy.
So you were testing me to get information?
Barty continued as if Monson never asked the question.
I have found that the most accurate indicators of people are their true desires, their morality, and their ingenuity. All of these can be seen in a situational task, like the one I assigned you.
Monson did not quite catch his meaning, so he remained silent. Barty leveled a penetrating stare across the table.
Look what I found out about you, Mr. Grey. I found out that you are resourceful. You were able to find a way out of the barracks, move along patrolled grounds, and arrive here, all without being caught. From that, I ascertained that you are gutsy, maybe even reckless. You were willing to come here, despite the chance of serious punishment, and without knowing the nature of the information that I had to share with you. This fascinates me. Incredibly enough, there is something about you that tells me not only did you ignore the consequences of your actions,
but it hardly seems like you even considered them. Here's the kicker, though. I also discovered that you were cautious and logical in your recklessness. Case in point, I told you in my letter to come alone, but I know that you have at least one of your friends out amongst the gardens here. Finally, I determined that you are willing to do what it takes to get the job done. Though I can't be certain, I am willing to bet that you had something to do with the commotion in front of the barracks that Mr. Gibson keeps hearing about on his all-too-expensive phone over there.
Barty glanced knowingly over his shoulder, acknowledging Aaron Gibson.
Now, I was able to accumulate all that information by handing you a simple white envelope. How could I not take advantage of such an opportunity? Ultimately, you will find, Monson Grey, that life is merely a series of tests. The measure of your success will be how you tackle those tests.
Monson reached for another cracker.
You practiced that speech?
Barty let out another unexpected chuckle.
Yes, I did. Did you like it?
Monson shrugged.
It was clever, though I noticed you left out your reasoning behind my testing.
You are a sharp one, my boy. You really are.
Barty leaned forward as he reached into his ridiculously expensive-looking jacket.
And alas, you, Mr. Grey, just asked the $40 billion question.
Barty took a second, nondescript envelope and tossed it to Monson. It landed on the table in front of him. Barty nodded towards the small package.
Open it, and I think you will like what you see.
Monson opened the envelope and pulled out the contents. It was a check from Barty Bank Shares of America, made out to a one Monson Grey. A check for $42,765,343,321.78.
So actually it's a $42 billion question. I rounded down. I hope you will forgive me.
Barty laughed at his own joke.
Say something, Monson. I just handed you a great deal of money.
Monson stared at the check in his hand.
Thank you?
Gibson sneered this time, making no attempt to hide it. Monson rounded on him.
Don't judge me, Gibson. What the heck am I supposed to say in a situation like this?
Gibson's face soured, even as Monson refocused on Barty.
Now, don't get me wrong, Chris. Not that having $42 billion wouldn't be cool or anything. I can go and buy that private island that I've always wanted and maybe find out if Bill Gates really is human. But you need to tell me why. And you need to tell me now. It's for your grandfather's share in the Barty conglomerate.
A familiar, motherly voice spoke quietly from directly behind Monson. He recognized the voice immediately, faster than immediately. It was as if he knew that she was going to show up. Molly walked out from the shadows, acknowledging Barty and Gibson as she did.
Mr. Barty, Mr. Gibson, how do you do?
We're fine, Miss Penmantail. Just fine.
Monson glanced from Molly to Barty and found both of them with very distasteful expressions. They glared at each other, both faces growing increasingly acidic the longer they looked. Monson attempted to lighten the mood.
I see you two know each other. How nice.
Molly shot Monson a sharp glare, a glare so sharp that he recoiled from its effects. It was plain to see she was pissed. Very pissed.
Yes, to answer your question, we know each other.
Molly turned her irritation back to Barty.
Did you make him an offer? You mean this?
Monson proffered the check to Molly, and her eyes flickered downward. A red, hot anger, the funny theatrical kind you see on cartoons when people get really upset or eat something spicy, filled Molly's face. When next she spoke, Monson could tell she was trying to hold her temper.
I told you were to have no contact with him until I was able to discuss his options. How dare you make an offer without consulting me? You know fully well that legally he could not accept it. Why would you do that?
That was certainly true. Monson was a minor after all.
Why would Barty do that?
Monson thought.
Another one of those tests, perhaps?
Molly grabbed Monson by the collar.
We are leaving. Monson, honey, let's go.
She dragged him to his feet and started pulling him away. He ripped himself from her grasp and spun around.
Chris!
Yes, Monson.
I still have questions.
Yes, but it seems our conversation has been cut short.
I will allow you one, and answer it if I can. Monson paused, wondering if this was really what he wanted to know. He made the decision in a flash. In reality, he did not even need to ask the full question, but merely say,
The mask, Barty.
Molly mimicked Monson's previous action of staring back and forth between individuals. Barty answered slowly and deliberately, lifting a hand and exaggerating his movements.
Like I said before, Mr. Grey.
Barty pulled at his gloved fingers, one by one.
We can't all be as brave as you.
Barty peeled the glove and stretched out his hand. Monson stared at the hand of Christopher Barty and the thin white scars that covered it. Monson, Molly, and Artorius trotted along the path leading from the inner gardens of the GM back to the main pathway that connected it and the barracks.
Why didn't you tell me that Barty wanted to see you?
Molly sounded incredibly angry. Monson's own disposition mirrored hers.
Because I didn't know I should. Why didn't you tell me who was coming, that he wanted to see me? You obviously knew. What's all this about? What about Grandfather's shares in the conglomerate?
Molly sighed as she glanced around her surroundings, apparently looking for eavesdroppers.
I suppose now is as good a time as any. Your grandfather left you, well, everything, Monson. His houses in Washington, California, the East Coast, England, France, and all of his property in Asia. He left you his cars, his weapons and coin collections. But most important of all, he left you his investment portfolio, which includes 34% of the Barty conglomerate.
Monson almost did something extremely corny, like digging in his ear before asking Molly to repeat herself. He did not, though, as the humor did not seem to fit the situation. He did, however, stare at Molly in confusion as he spoke.
Molly, when we first discussed coming here, about the money and all that other stuff, why didn't you tell me? I'm so sorry, Monson, honey.
She sounded like she meant it.
But think about my position for a moment. How was I supposed to tell you about all this when you couldn't even remember your grandfather? It's a bit too much for any youth to handle. Sweetie, I don't think you get it. Your grandfather was one of the richest people in the world. This, of course, means now you are. Why do you think I wanted to get you to this school so badly?
Monson started to interrupt her, but Molly preempted him.
I know you are upset, Monson, honey, and I am sorry I didn't tell you. I really am. But you have to trust things like this to me. I am your guardian, after all, and I might not be able to do much, but at least I can take care of your inheritance.
It's funny you should mention that, Molly. Artorius finally spoke up. I've been wondering about that for a while now. Ever since I found out that Monson's grandfather was the elusive silent partner of Christopher Barty, I've been thinking about his estate, and a little about your reasons for coming here.
Molly, you knew Monson before the incident at the bridge, right?
Molly nodded her head slowly.
Do you know why Monson and his grandfather were so keen to get Monson in as the Horumvir?
Molly replied regretfully. He only talked to me about it on occasion, Arthur. Why do you ask?
Well, it's a bit on the weird side. With all that wealth, why go through the trouble of becoming the Horumvir? The position is extremely flashy, and let's face it, Monson's not really a flashy guy.
A lot of it had to do with running under the radar. Molly, that doesn't make any sense. What about the Horumvir position is under the radar? It's about as far over the radar as they come. Molly smiled in a sad sort of way. That depends on what kind of radar you're trying to avoid, Monson dear.
Monson and Artorius waited for Molly to continue that thought, and felt disappointed when she did not.
Molly quickened her pace. I've been meaning to mention this for a while now. There's a lot of history that I haven't told you, Monson. Stuff that might help you remember and, if not remember, cope with current circumstances. I just haven't been able to get all of Marcus's affairs in order, so I wasn't sure where to start. You sound sort of stressed, Molly. Did my grandfather have a lot going on?
Molly smiled weakly.
You have no idea, Monson dear. No idea.
The conversation took a brief reprieve as the trio neared the barracks. Many MIBs and CIAs were making a racket securing the area as the emergency medical staff tended to the injured Mark and Jim. Molly maneuvered the boys skillfully, using her intimidating presence when anyone tried to stop them or ask them questions. Monson stole a glance at the prone figures of the MIBs. He truly hoped that there would be no permanent damage. The three used the regular student entrance instead of the Horumvir's private elevator, which meant that there were several flights of stairs in their foreseeable future. Monson did not mind, though. It would be nice to work off some of the excess energy from the night, and of course, there was pondering to attend to. Pondering that could not wait much longer. He groaned. It was going to be a long night. He and the others passed through the boys' entrance of the barracks dormitory and moved straight for the elevator in the middle of the floor. Idly, somewhere on the wisp of his wandering concentration, Monson noted that this was the first time he had been to one of the dormitory floors. The thought unsettled him a little. Not that this was shocking or anything. Routinely, and really without thinking about it, the boys opted to gather in his apartment for obvious reasons. He made a mental post-it note to correct that the next time they all had some leisure time. Molly marched Monson and Artorius to the elevator.
I really should give you three a scolding. And yes, I meant you three. I know that Cassius is involved in this. Where is he?
Artorius and Monson exchanged glances, though it was Artorius that actually spoke up. In truth, we really don't know.
Really?
Replied Molly doubtfully.
You have no idea where he is?
The elevator chimed as it touched down, and its doors opened. They entered without a second thought.
No, we really don't.
Monson picked up the explanation. He leaned back as the doors started to close.
He left us shortly after. Hey, hello, can you hold the elevator?
They heard the voice off in the distance, but a yell from inside the elevator space scared everyone within earshot and drowned it out. A banshee shriek spilled from Molly as she jumped around as if she were possessed.
A rat! I just saw a rat! Kill it! Kill it! Monson! Arthur! Get it!
Monson searched frantically. Now that she had mentioned it, he did see something in his peripheral zip through the closing door at the last second, but he just figured it was... Monson went rigid as he felt something rub up against his leg. He dipped down and gazed into bright yellow eyes that contrasted sharply against pitch-black fur. He smiled. His friend was back.
Molly, relax. He's a friend.
Monson offered a hand, which the cat met with enthusiasm.
Well, hello there.
It's been a while. How are you? Wait, you weren't the one that called a second ago. Then, who?
The doors parted with another ding.
Thanks, guys. I really didn't feel like walking.
Monson, Artorius, Molly, and even the black cat stared awestruck at Damien, the Diamond Peterson.
I really don't know how to start this. I know how my younger self used to start entries, but I don't really like that. I think it's stupid to start by greeting yourself or your journal as if it's a person. Seriously, who does that? Then again, well, never mind. Moving on. So, I don't know why I didn't think to do this earlier. Well, that's not entirely true. Actually, that's not true at all. I don't know why I would make excuses to my journal. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. I've been meaning to do this for a while, but something seemed to always get in the way. It actually makes me wonder how my younger self did this. I'm 15 and I have the attention span of a 3-year-old. Oh yeah, I'm 15. Ha! That's the big news today. I'm 15 years of age. Sweet, right? I don't feel that much different from when I was 14, but I doubt anyone ever does. We're supposed to have some sort of party later, but who knows if that'll actually happen. Artorius and Casey both left for vacation 2 weeks ago. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it has been lonely. The new semester starts this week too. I'm actually really excited for it. It's been way too quiet around here. In the spirit of new beginnings, I thought it would be nice to do a simple recap of what's been happening in my life the past couple of months. I think the thing that stands out most in my mind is Cyan's garden. Wow, you should see it. I don't want to put too many details in case someone reads this, but it's something. I just kind of ran into it while walking behind the field when I was walking back from 6th period. And wow, the place is magical. She's something, that girl. Even if she has the disposition of a wet rabbit. Disclaimer. If you ever read this, Cyan, I did not write that. It was my evil self. Hit him with your boken. Moving on, I think that the biggest scandal or news for the school over the last couple of months was the Gossip Guy debacle back in late October. The story is a long one, so I don't want to get into the details here, but let's just say that people lost a lot of faith in the site when they reported that Damien the Diamond Peterson was in the hospital. Okay, that statement's a little misleading. Him being in the hospital was actually true. That wasn't the problem. It was the reason he was in the hospital that got everyone worked up. Damien left school to get his appendix out. That's right. He left for a routine, albeit emergency surgery. So consider his shock when he found out that most of the school thought he was dead or close to it. Molly, Artorius, and I were the first to see him in one piece upon his return. Yeah, that was an awkward conversation. Which brings me to my next item of discussion. I'm totally crazy. Yes, I said I'm completely crazy. I just mentioned that Damien had not in fact been attacked in his private weight room and had just left for an emergency surgery. So, consequently, he doesn't remember speaking to me in the weight room. As a matter of fact, he doesn't remember speaking to me or going to that weight room at all that day. So, really, I don't know what happened. The only evidence that I have that I'm not completely delusional is that the weight room was in fact destroyed. So, I'm thinking I did that during one of my little crazy person episodes, and just don't remember. I don't know why Damien was involved. Still trying to figure that one out. Classes ended on a high note, my favorite being Mr. Gatt's class. The end of semester project was especially revelatory. Are you ready for the information? I don't know if you are. Okay, I'll just say it. Atlantis. It exists. I know, right? I was shocked as well. LOL. Let me explain. Instead of a test, Mr. Gatt paired us into teams and we did a mock sort of trial thing where we tried to determine if Atlantis existed, and my team totally won. Between you, me, and the pen here, I actually convinced myself there for a bit that Atlantis was indeed a real place. I know, crazy, right? Highlights of that experience were the following. Derek totally lost his cool. I have no idea why, but he started blubbering like an idiot. It was awesome. Next came the expert testimony that Taurus put on. I seriously can't even describe it. Taurus Green, the scientist, way too hot. I'm telling you. I think most of the guys in the class started a collection to force Taurus into the field, claiming that there is a governmental interest in getting her to do so. I thought their argument was pretty convincing. The government in this country has been trying, with no success, to improve the math and science scores among primary, secondary, and higher education students for the last 20 years. The senior class at Corn University actually put up the proposal that if the professors looked like Taurus, there would be a lot more interest. Note to future self. I've enclosed a picture of said scientist, Taurus Green. When you read this in 20 years and behold her, remember to thank me. Sincerely, your past self. Beyond that, everything has been completely normal. No, really, I mean it. I haven't seen or heard from my angry selves in a long time, which I guess is weird. It's been so long that I have to wonder if they were ever real in the first place. My nightmares are still there, though. I am constantly dreaming of this massive mountain pathway, a trail in the wilderness, that for some reason I can't get myself to traverse. There's also this sort of roaring in the background that's driving me batty. The only thing that comes to mind is white water. I have to admit, it's starting to get frustrating. The buck doesn't stop there either. I am now learning Casey's Galo form. This is the striking form that Casey favors so much. I'm pretty good at it too. Maybe because it's a lot like using a blade. I don't know. But it seems that I have completely lost the ability to see Casey's flash fist. Something that he was all too kind to point out. We've tested it a couple of times now. I mean, I can't even feel it anymore. Don't ask. I have no idea why. So, to spite Casey, I adopted a cat. Okay, not really to spite him. I adopted the cat because I like the cat. But I did name him Bob, and that was definitely to spite Casey. He thinks it's a stupid name. Casey's been a bit distant lately, ever since the night we went to meet up with Barty and ran into Kylie. Okay, again, that's not exactly true. We really didn't even know why she was there or carrying all those documents. Now that I mention it, we never did find out why she was skulking around that night, or what the documents were all about. We went back the next morning and everything was gone. Side note, isn't skulking a great word? I mean, seriously, it has so much depth. I love it. The new school semester starts this week. I'm pretty sure that I already mentioned that. I'm wondering how the students are going to adapt to the changes here in Corrin, which are extensive. When Barty announced his project to redo Corrin's campus, he wasn't messing around. He's creating lighted walkways, weird obelisk works of art, and the western dormitory is almost completely gutted. The MIB's presence here has also seemed to heighten for some reason. Not that I'm complaining. They don't affect me all that much, but Barty's not even here most of the time, so why are they hanging around? Overall, the break was pretty upbeat for me. I got a lot of sword practice in, though I had to borrow one of Casey's bokens. Now that I have some money, I really should buy a new one. I still have the splinters and broken hilt of the last one. As of now, I can't bring myself to part with it. Who would have thought I was so sentimental? I also have a new obsession. The show So You Think You Can Dance. I don't even know why I like the bloody thing. It's like in its 50th season, but man, I love Master Grey.
Brian poked his head in Monson's room.
You have guests.
Monson looked up from his journal.
All right, Brian. I'll be out in a minute.
Monson skipped a page and started writing again.
I forgot to say, Barty came back with another offer, and this time Molly accepted it. I'm not going to put the amount, but I've basically got more money than I know what to do with. I thought about buying a mountain. I've never known anyone who owns a mountain. Maybe I could put my face on it like Mount Rushmore. Mount Grey. I wonder how hard that would be. I might have to look into that. I better go. People are here. I will check in with you later. You? Blah. There I go, personifying my journal. I feel so lame.
Monson put down his pen and went to meet his friends. The first week back to classes was brutal. Seriously, horribly brutal. Monson did not know whether the teachers were trying a new sort of shock therapy for learning, or they just wanted to prove a point. Regardless, the students suffered a rude awakening those first few days of classes. By the time Friday came around, everyone was ready for the weekend. Monson, Artorius, and Casey stayed in that Friday, deciding to forego the student mixer and the crowds. It kind of depressed Monson, who actually made a bet with Artorius that Casey would insist on attending the social event. So he was surprised when Casey was the one to suggest staying in. Now Monson owed Artorius a favor, one that he could not go back on. This made Monson extremely nervous.
Oh, it's good to be back.
Artorius stretched as the clock struck 1 a.m., and the boys ended their movie marathon. The others laughed as they switched to the Japanese direct subtitle channel. They all ended up falling asleep from there, the rich tones of Japanese voice actors seducing their senses. Cassius K needed a beating in the world's worst way.
Oh, Gray!
A familiar voice startled Monson back into reality as it washed over him. He felt annoyed, as he had just been enjoying an utterly delicious sleep. But Monson recognized the voice that just entered the room, and it was not smart to remain unaware when Casey came for a wake-up call. Monson held his breath, hearing the patter of bare feet pop on the floor and go airborne. Monson reacted in an instant, rolling to his left and fleeing his blankets. He hit the floor with grace, landing on one knee, cringing at the touch of cool wood. The move was well worth it, as he caught a priceless glimpse of a shocked Casey floating through the air, his elbow positioned forward where it could do the most damage to his unsuspecting friend. Monson smiled, readying his counterattack. Casey landed with a splash of pillows and blankets, right as Monson whipped down a pillow, crashing it right on Casey's head.
Ouch, dude!
Casey's voice came out muffled from under Monson's weapon.
How did you know, man? Unfair. I'm calling for a recount.
You seem to be in good spirits. Artorius assumed his customary position by the full-frame window, overlooking the national forest.
I do find myself feeling really good today. I had an excellent night's sleep, one of the best I've had in a long time.
You must be feeling good. You reacted very well there. We'll make a fighter out of you yet. Monson beamed, taking a sarcastic bow, which he ended up paying dearly for, as Casey sprung out from under the pillows and pounced. After their scuffle, the boys moved from Monson's bedroom to where Brian's customary muffins, fruit, and juices sat waiting. They each grabbed one and proceeded to the sitting area where they ate and chatted idly about what they should do with the day.
How about a workout?
Artorius tried to speak between massive bites of a bran muffin.
Gray's been looking so good these days. I hate to waste the time. You just wait, Case. I'm going to make him good enough to beat both of us.
Casey started to whine.
An hour and a half, 5 days a week is totally enough. Besides, we start basketball soon. We should take advantage of days like this.
Casey's right.
Monson yawned.
You know, I'm not opposed just to hanging out here today.
That's not what I meant, Gray.
Casey threw a piece of his muffin at Monson.
We stay here all the time, bro. We have the ability to leave this semester. Let's get out and go blow up a mailbox or some.
Brian's entrance into the apartment shut Casey up. The boys turned toward Brian to see him carrying some plastic grocery bags, a crisp dress suit straight from the dry cleaners, and a glossy pair of trendy black shoes.
Yo, Brian.
Monson threw up a hand, too lazy to actively watch.
I hope you got some more Pop-Tarts. Hey, what's with the monkey suit? You got a date or something? What an intriguing thought.
Brian sounded amused. He hung the dress clothes neatly on Monson's valet just inside his bedroom and placed the shoes promptly underneath. Apparently satisfied, he moved into the bar area, started to pull out fruits, vegetables, a knife and cutting board, and then promptly began to chop everything up. Monson was about to ask Brian a question when the smile on Brian's face caught him. Brian was grinning like a devious child.
Brian?
Monson started to move toward the bar.
Why are you smiling like a naughty 4-year-old?
Brian did not answer, but just continued to chop, slice, and dice in preparation for something absurdly healthy that no normal person would want to eat. Brian sliced the last apple, then proceeding to the sink, he started to wash his hands, that same knowing smile transfixed to his face. Monson bared his teeth in frustration, but he also understood Brian well enough to know that pestering him was a waste of time. Monson had just about given up when Brian said quite suddenly,
Master Grey, it is about that time. Please, open the blinder to the TV. Brian?
Monson stared at him, unsure as to what to do.
Why are you acting hero?
Brian shot him that same warm smile.
Open the blinder to the TV.
Resigned, Monson turned towards Casey and beckoned for the huge controller sitting on his coffee table. Casey grabbed it and gave it a toss, which Monson caught nonchalantly. He pushed the reveal icon at the top of the screen, and with everyone else in the room watched as the automatic blinder retracted. I'm never gonna get over that. Casey smiled. So cool. As the reverbs of the last gear sounded and shifted into place, Monson turned back towards Brian.
Are you gonna tell me what's going on now?
Brian again did not say anything, but gestured towards the controller in Monson's hand, which Monson gave to him. Brian turned on the TV and started flipping channels until he reached the
All Access network.
Monson let out a fairly believable fake vomiting sound.
Blech! Why do we care what the school? Today's top story is an interesting one, boys and girls,
said the smooth voice of Derek Dayton.
I know that everyone's been waiting for the nominees of this year's spring solstice, which yours truly just received. The holdup was due to one mystery nominee who the committee could not come to a decision on. Brian, I know what you're gonna say, and there is no way that I'm going to that dance. And now, the Augusta nominees.
Derek's voice had his usual, arrogant tone. Monson ignored him and continued to glare unflinchingly at Brian, who was smiling calmly. Well, there's no surprise. Casey kept his eyes on the TV, with a mix of amusement and annoyance.
Taurus Green, Cyan Harrison, Mary Braden, Amber Summers, and Kylie Cormack for the girls.
Casey spoke, looking thoughtful. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't go. This could get ugly.
I will second that.
Monson shifted back to look at Casey.
Look, let's just have another boys' night out. I'll call in the helicopter and we'll go to... I do not think that is going to work.
Brian simply examined the cuff of his sleeve.
You will be busy that night. I already told you.
Monson turned back towards Brian.
I'm not. And the final nominee for Augustin, drumroll please. Wait, what? That's impossible.
Derek looked at the camera, his eyes growing to the size of stoplights.
The final nominee for the spring solstice's Augustine is Monson Grey. You gotta be kidding me. Freshmen aren't allowed to enter. Indigo said so. You have to be backed by the Senate and every...
Actually, what Indigo said was that they hardly ever get through. Artorius continued watching the TV.
Is that what she said? Are you sure?
I remember everything that comes out of Indigo's mouth. Artorius stared off into the distance, a very far-away look on his face.
That's not creepy or anything.
Monson rounded on Brian.
How on earth did you know? How do you always know? I don't get it. I have my sources.
Brian fixed about retrieving cups.
Now, how about a fruit smoothie? It will make... Brian, why are you so calm? As a matter of fact, why are all of you so calm? Hello? You do realize what just happened, right?
Casey spoke up.
Honestly, I can't say I'm terribly shocked. I mean, I've just kind of gotten used to weird stuff happening around you.
And I'm actually kind of happy. That means we get to go in your group.
Guys, you don't understand. I don't do dances. I don't ask girls out. For heaven's sake, look at me. Hero.
Brian used that same calm, comforting voice.
Take a breath.
Monson glared at him.
Come on, you will feel better.
Monson did what he was told, closing his eyes. He took one deep, steadying breath, and then another. After a few of these, he did in fact start to feel better. When he opened his eyes, everyone in the room was watching him. Monson was at a loss for words.
Master Grey.
Brian walked to the side of the seating area.
This is a dance, not a conference on world peace or a meeting of the Federal Reserve. The what?
Monson raised his signature eyebrow.
Never mind.
Brian chuckled affectionately.
This is not difficult. All you have to do is find a nice girl, ask her to dance, and then go and enjoy. I know you like to dance. Molly told me so. She did what?
Monson burned bright red.
Well, it's true, I do like that show, So You Think You Can. Molly mentioned that you danced all the time before your incapacitation. She said what?
Really?
Casey chimed in, suddenly interested.
What kind of dancing? Breakdancing? Hip-hop?
Ballet. Apparently Master Grey was quite the nutcracker.
They watched Brian's calm smile take on a malicious hint.
Brian! Now that's just a downright lie.
Brian, Artorius, and Casey all broke out laughing. Monson just threw up his hands, defeated. The news of Monson's nomination spread like a weaponized version of the Black Plague. As such, by Monday night, everyone in the school, including the teachers, knew that someone from the school senate entered and backed Monson Grey. This did not go over well. Not at all. In the other students' defense, Monson thought it probably would not have been any better for any other freshman. It was not until that night that Casey explained. Apparently, the dance was a huge deal, with all kinds of important people, and ripe with all kinds of opportunity. Many of the most successful newcomers in show business made their connections through the meet and greet and the dinner of eloquence. There were a great many foreign figures and political leaders that also attended, giving the politically savvy an opportunity to wine and dine. Truthfully, just about every industry imaginable was present, from news to music producers. Monson lamented upon hearing this. No wonder everyone was so pissed. Thoughts of the event seemed to occupy the minds of all the other students with a consistency that bordered on festering. Girls were looking at boys with newfound fire as they scouted their potential matchups. The boy nominees, which included Damian Peterson, Derek Dayton, Boston Timberland, and a few others Monson did not know, all dealt with a renewed or newfound spotlight in different ways. Monson, who already had an inordinate amount of attention, was receiving even more than his fair share. As idiotic as it sounded, he was now being approached by random girls who would attempt to force conversation about things like the weather. The weather? Seriously, who does that? Artorius and Casey, of course, were not the least bit empathetic.
When did I walk into the Twilight Zone?
Monson fell into step next to Artorius and Casey. The two had been waiting patiently while a group of sophomore girls Monson had never seen, let alone talked to, accosted him. It's a big opportunity. Casey spied over his shoulder at the girls who were waving enthusiastically. The youngest hornbearer in history is now nominated by the school senate, a task that most understood as impossible. You're going to get a lot of hype in the coming weeks leading up to the dance, and whoever your date ends up being, she's going to get the same treatment.
So? I still don't understand why that would make me a rock star all of a sudden. Now, really, how do I go from one of the most disliked individuals on campus to one of the most loved? I mean, I think that blonde girl over there was with Derek and his goons when they tried to jump me right before winter break.
Pity. Casey tried not to laugh. She's cute.
I don't find this funny.
Monson glared at Casey.
And you so aren't helping.
Okay. You're right. I haven't been very helpful.
Casey put a thoughtful finger to his cheek.
Let me think. Arthur, who are you asking?
Artorius, who was still watching the group of sophomore girls, turned back towards them. He shied away, an embarrassed look on his face. Already asked someone.
What? Who? When?
Indigo, said Artorius, his face a bright shade of red. I asked her at lunch on Sunday. She told me yes this morning, but only on one condition.
Condition?
Monson scratched at his chin.
What was it?
That we had to go in the same group as Monson.
What the heck is that?
Casey's face screwed up in a mild blend of thoughtfulness and irritation.
You know, I gotta say, she's a seriously weird chick.
No disagreement here.
The boys continued to walk, reaching the inner gardens, the same garden where Monson met with Barty so many months ago. Monson felt a certain warmth for the place. These days, he and his friends tried to avoid the gardens, as it had become a sort of informal meeting grounds for students. The gardens was not as close as the grounds outside the barracks, but seeing as most of that was ripped up, it was within reason that the students would want to find somewhere else to hang. Most of the cool kids could be found there if they were not studying or doing the other various activities that Collin had to offer. While Monson was not a fan of the crowds, Casey really liked the atmosphere, which Monson secretly thought had something to do with Kylie. He kept this observation to himself, of course, as Casey was always so sensitive about her.
What are you doing here, Grey?
A smoothly arrogant voice sounded, jarring Monson and the others. He pivoted to his left to see none other than Derek Dayton, sitting primly on the grass, surrounded by his usual goons and groupies.
Derek, you're looking delightful, Grey.
Derek touched his face fondly.
That's the word you were looking for.
A cold smile played on Monson's lips.
I was thinking more along the lines of ripe or maybe moldy.
Derek's eyes narrowed.
You haven't answered my question, Grey. And what question was that? What are you doing here?
Monson felt too annoyed to avoid the confrontation.
I would think that was obvious, Derek. I'm standing here. Why do you ask? I thought I forbade you from coming here. Yes, you did say that, didn't you?
Monson offered a very friendly, very fake smile.
But there's a problem with that. You were under the assumption that I care about what you say. Oh, and FYI?
Monson leaned down towards Derek, starting to whisper.
I don't.
His comment hung in the air for a moment, the quiet following like a hangover.
Always the hero, aren't you, Grey? Not by choice, Derek.
Monson motioned to the others.
Your day is quickly coming, Grey. Just you wait. You really are an idiot, Derek. You know, I don't even know why you hate me so much. I couldn't agree more.
A quiet, yet penetrating voice shot through them, causing all to glance towards the sound.
I think your hairline is receding, Derek. You may want to get that checked out.
Cheeks and soft, slightly pink lips were all that could be seen under the dark baseball cap set as an obstacle to the mountain of shiny black hair. Cyan stepped forward, closely followed by her sister Indigo.
Ah, Cyan.
Derek spoke in his fruity, unctuous voice, alternating and making it take on a revered, slightly more mature tone.
Why don't we stop all the preamble? We all know what you think of my looks.
The girls sitting at Derek's feet stared at Cyan with open disgust, their hatred of the eldest Harrison actually emanating like heat from asphalt. Cyan pushed the front of her hat up a bit, revealing her icy blue eyes.
Seems like your fan club has something to say.
Cyan peered down at the girls. Derek glanced toward his groupies, who quickly averted their eyes. Cyan's ability with a boken was legendary. There was no way they would risk an open confrontation with her. Not if they wanted to keep their pretty faces intact.
Good girls,
cooed Cyan softly.
Come, boys, let's leave Derek to his harem.
Cyan promptly herded the others away from Derek.
It's okay, Cyan. I love to watch you go.
Cyan ignored him, leading the group to a grassy knoll where they took up seats under the sweeping branches of a massive weeping willow. The place was hardly serene, however. Not far away, a cluster of football players, including Damian Peterson, were tossing a football, making rude comments, and generally acting like stereotypical jocks. Monson sat down and smiled as he inadvertently caught a glimpse of Taurus Green sitting across the makeshift field. She was beaming at one of her friends, who was apparently in the middle of a very riveting story, judging by the looks of her spectators. Monson continued to watch as Taurus giggled enthusiastically. His smile widened. Funny how certain people could add so much to a setting. Taurus was truly one of those people. Her movements were neither forced nor exaggerated, and yet, while her smile was laid back, spouting confidence, she just emitted likability. Monson could not help but study Taurus as any real understanding of her continued to elude him. Like when she spoke with him when she was getting ready to perform at the assembly back in October. The bulletproof Taurus, which was a phrase Monson coined, was not as bulletproof as everyone always thought. When she got excited, things seemed to change. Her hair seemed to turn just a little redder, her movements a little more forceful, and her tongue just a little sharper. Simply put, Taurus Green's well-known passion added coloring, making her personality and appearance change. An odd characterization, yes, but true nonetheless. There were little signs of such foolishness now. Taurus seemed totally lost in the punchline of her friend's story. Well, then again, maybe not entirely. Monson focused on Taurus's eyes, which were not quite as attentive as Monson knew they could be. It was as if she was looking right through her friend to something else. He sat for a moment more, trying to determine what exactly she was thinking. But as so often happened at times like these, those times when you want to look a little longer, Taurus glanced in his direction. Her eyes met his. She just totally caught you. Casey started to chuckle. Man, that girl likes to tease you, bro. Artorius was the one who answered. Ha! Grey likes to be teased by that girl. Who are you kidding, Case? Besides, at least he's got something going on. She's not even that cute. Indigo adjusted her expression, attaching a gnarly look to her face.
She stared at Taurus, even as Taurus reinvested into conversation with her friends.
She looks like a hedgehog with all that. Not even that cute.
Casey sputtered in outright indignation.
Are you insane? She's one of the hottest girls in...
As far as upperclassmen girls go.
Monson noticed Artorius' obvious emphasis on upperclassmen.
Kylie's cuter than Taurus.
Both Indigo and Casey narrowed their eyes at Artorius, the daggers manifesting with spiteful clarity. Artorius did not seem to notice, however.
And Cyan is cuter than both of them, so I'm not sure what you two are arguing about.
Now, there was an interesting development. After Artorius' declaration, Monson attempted some restraint, forcing himself not to instantly stare at Cyan. It was in vain. He settled his eyes upon her and watched as a slight rosy tinge colored her olive skin. An amazing phenomenon that Monson remembered seeing a few times before. Artorius was right. Cyan really was beautiful.
Anyway, Monson, as I was saying before we were so rudely interrupted...
Casey threw a nasty glance at Indigo.
I think I gotta wait for these random chickadees to leave you alone, bro.
Monson tore himself from Cyan.
I'm all ears.
Casey nodded.
So, check this. The only way to get these random girls to leave you alone, beyond actually going with someone, is to set the bar so high that they won't have the guts to approach you.
What the heck does that mean?
It means you need to ask someone to this dance, bro.
Monson glared at Casey as he replied sarcastically.
Oh, thanks, Case. That's a lot of help. Whatever would I do without you?
It's the best way, and you know it.
That's a terrible idea. Besides, there isn't anyone I want to ask.
You meant to say there's no one that you aren't too much of a coward to ask.
Casey's words seemed laced with challenge.
That's not it at all. I'm not afraid to ask a girl to a dance. It's just there's really no one I want to take.
So, if I told you to ask someone, you'd do it? No fear of rejection, no hiding in the bathroom. You just walk right up to her and ask?
Of course.
Monson folded his arms indignantly.
Okay, then.
Casey glanced around their little circle.
Why don't I pick someone and you ask her?
Excuse me?
No, seriously, listen to my plan.
Casey cleared his throat.
2 birds with 1 stone. You ask someone who is totally hot and super popular, who will probably just say no. If they say yes, then sweet, you're good to go, but you'll be expecting them to say no. Once they do, you've set the bar so high that all of these other girls will have to leave you alone, thinking that you're that type of guy. Furthermore, we can establish you're not a chicken.
Monson sat there and thought for a while, slightly looking off into the distance, his eyes unfocused. As stupid as it sounded, there was a rather perverse logic to Casey's suggestion. However, the whole idea of actually asking someone with the intention of getting rejected seemed overtly idiotic. So what should he do? A sharp poke to his midsection brought Monson back to reality.
Monson!
Artorius poked him again.
Ouch, Arthur. That hurts.
Monson scowled.
What is it?
Artorius pointed to the direction in which Monson just turned from. A group of girls they recognized from their year sat not far away from their little group. All were looking his way, smiling and giggling behind hands. Monson gave a resigned wave of the hand.
I can't believe I'm agreeing to this. Okay, let's get this over with. Who do I ask?
That's a good question.
Casey grinned deviously.
Let me ask you a question before we start, Grey.
Monson cocked the eyebrow.
What's that, Case?
Are you sure there isn't anyone that you want to ask?
No, not really.
Casey let out a forced laugh.
Oh, okay then. Now, this girl has to be popular and pretty and not random. It probably wouldn't stick if you just asked some chick you didn't even know. No, it has to be someone you're familiar with, or at least someone you've talked to. I wonder who would have that kind of sticking power. In the midst of Casey's mock consideration, Monson knew he had made a big mistake. Taurus Green!
I should have seen that one coming,
thought Monson, even as his jaw jerked open.
No way, Casey. You're on crack. There's no way that I'm going.
I knew you were chicken. Casey donned a triumphant smile on his face. This was probably Casey's plan from the beginning, but for what purpose? Monson did not know. He narrowed his eyes, letting all his discontentment bore into Casey. He was stuck between a rock and a really hard place. He could either embarrass himself so thoroughly that he would have to hide for the remainder of high school, or he could live with Cassius K and the never-ending reminder of his big talk for the rest of his life. Monson decided that the latter was a much greater evil.
Okay, I'll ask her.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me, shouted Indigo. What's with you? Asked Casey, a knowing smile on his face. Does that upset you, Indigo? But why on earth would—
Shut up, Cassius,
Indigo growled in a forced voice of calm. Not that I care, but why should he go through the embarrassment of asking Taurus when there are other girls that are way cuter and might even say yes? If I didn't know any better, Indigo, I would have thought that you were jealous.
Indigo does have a point,
Cyan resounded in a quiet voice.
I don't really know Taurus very well, but the odds of her saying yes are not all that good. Why not ask someone that would actually go with you? Cyan,
breathed Monson, though no one could hear. So you don't want to ask Taurus? Casey threw his hands around his neck, sounding relaxed as he did. Then who do you want to ask?
Excuse me.
The familiar voice that jarred them had a much greater effect than the situation really warranted. Each of them took a moment to gather themselves. Damian Peterson stood before them, spilling awkwardness from every pore of his body. He looked at each of them saying their respective name in turn.
Monson, Casey, Artorius, Indigo, how are all of you?
We're okay. Casey's voice sounded unsure. And yourself?
I'm fine.
Uncomfortable silence followed, exacerbated by the many people noticing their conversation. The noise in the gardens died out around them, and everyone in their little group could feel the eyes of the rest of the student body that was present.
The reason I came over is—
Damian stumbled stupidly over his words.
What I wanted to say was, Cyan, can I have a word?
Surprised, Cyan gave Monson a sharp expression that he did not quite know how to take. She answered Damian.
All right, sure.
Cyan sounded as unsure and awkward as Damian did. The eldest Harrison got to her feet, adjusted her clothes, and followed Damian as he led her a short distance away. What was that all about? Not sure, said Artorius, watching them walk away. Maybe— Hey, Monson, where are you going? Casey and Indigo gazed at the retreating backside of Monson as he strolled towards Taurus Green in apparent confidence.
What in the world am I doing?
Thought Monson.
I shouldn't be asking anyone to this stupid thing. Blast you, Casey, and your idiotic ideas.
People were starting to notice him, now quickly switching their interest away from the diamond and Cyan. The football players glared scornfully as he neared.
Please don't do anything, please don't do anything.
The thought bounced around his brain as any remaining activity happening around him sputtered and died. In the middle of the football players now, Monson's heart almost stopped in a particularly tense moment when one of the senior wide receivers tried to catch a wild toss from the backup quarterback.
The boy nearly knocked Monson flat on his butt. Luckily, the receiver's evasion skills enabled him to avoid Monson at the last second. Monson let out an audible sigh as he continued across the grass. People's curiosity reached critical the closer he moved towards Taurus and her group. A curiosity that was not the jocks alone. Plainly, Taurus was also watching, albeit covertly, her eyes continually shifting in his direction. Monson at this point was simply trying his best not to break out into a run. He continued to move steadily, everything focused on Taurus, bracing himself as more and more people's attention shifted to him. He was thankful that Taurus greeted him with a smile.
Well, if it isn't my hero in training. And what do I owe for the honor of your visit?
You flatter me, my lady.
Monson took a knee next to her.
I've just come to bask in your ambience.
Taurus leaned a little closer towards him. Well, aren't you sweet? You'd better be careful with those fancy words, Mr. Grey. I might have to take advantage of you.
Monson forced, or tried to force, his face not to turn red. Actually, I was wondering if I could speak with you for a second. Alone, if possible.
Taurus wetted her lips. Well, I don't see why not.
Monson stood up, proffering his hand to Taurus, and accidentally caught a glimpse of Artorius, Indigo, and Casey, who were looking at him with complete shock. Cyan, back from her conversation with Damien, was now propped up against the willow, a ways off from the others. That was quick, thought Monson as his eyes met hers. Yet, as always, her expression was unreadable. Remembering where he was, he made another obvious attempt to help Taurus up. She took his hand and stood up, sweeping under her skirt so as to not flash the entire varsity football team. Taurus let go of Monson's hand, her fingers skimming his palms and fingertips. Monson tried to control his trembling extremity. Get a grip! Monson took his other hand and clamped down on the trembling one. Just do it and be done, he thought. Taking deep, steadying breaths, Monson reached a stone bench tucked away from the student body. Despite the distance, he could still feel a great many eyes peering at them with varying degrees of interest. Whipping his mind back, he began to steel himself for this idiotic venture. Thanks for giving me a moment of your time. He was not really sure where to start. I need your help, and you may be the only person that can.
Can't say that was what I was expecting you to say.
Taurus gave a slight pout. A look of confusion worked its way onto her otherwise relaxed appearance.
But I will help you if I can. What can I do for you?
I'm in desperate need of your expertise.
I'm not sure where you're going with this, Monson.
Monson tried to hold back a nervous laugh. No, of course you wouldn't. It would probably be easier if I just asked. Would clear this whole thing up faster than me trying to sit here and explain. I mean, honestly, how dumb am I standing around rambling like an idiot when you don't even know...
Know what?
Asked Taurus, cutting across his babbling. Taurus, would you go to the spring solstice with me? Holy blue bloody crap. He actually did it. If Taurus was surprised, then she hid it well. Oh, Monson, You don't have to say anything else. I totally understand. Monson could barely contain his embarrassment and was starting to understand how dumb of a plan this was. He should have just asked someone he liked, or at the very least someone that would have said yes. What was he thinking? Well, he might as well finish it properly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. Casey just thought that... He stopped and took a deep breath, stalling for a moment. Look, I'm really sorry, Taurus. I should go. Thanks for taking the time. Monson turned, intending to leave, silently braiding himself for the whole thing. Wait! Taurus yelled with a shrill voice and caught his hand as he started to walk off.
They hung motionless in time, Taurus holding on to his hand in almost suspended animation. She gave him a little tug, just a little one, applying just enough force to make him turn back towards her. They gazed at each other, the soft green eyes of Taurus and the cloudy blue-gray of Monson boring into one another. She smiled an embarrassed smile. Her next move made his knees buckle. Taurus Green took his hand in hers, turning it over and resting it on her upturned palm. He gaped as small, delicate fingers crested the scarred and cracked tissue of his hand, wrist, and forearm. Monson felt an overwhelming warm tingle shoot up his arm. She finally spoke. It's awfully rude to ask someone out and not give them a chance to answer. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... Taurus touched his lips with one finger, silencing him immediately. She brought her hands to his hips as she stepped into him, her finger brushing under his uniform, touching exposed skin. She whispered, "Ask me again." Monson did so, his tone still confused and a little afraid. Taurus smiled seductively as she tucked back his hair to expose his ear. Her hand on his neck now, she pulled him closer until her lips were a finger's breadth away. She whispered 3 little words.
I'd love to.